Looking to have your groceries delivered? Try Instacart. By following the link in the show notes, you can shop multiple stores, get the products you love from local stores, and get your delivery in as fast as 1 hour. Plus, Instacart highlights deals to save you money. And for our listeners, free delivery on your first order over $35. Hi, this is Bob Sorrentino from ItalianGenealogy.blog, and I'm here with Frank Chinappi and also the Grisnelli sisters, and we're going to have a great conversation about their research and their family. So welcome, Frank.
Hello, thank you for having me.
No problem. I'm going to have you introduce the sisters.
All right, well, joining us, we have Lisa.
Hi, Bob. Hi, Frank.
We have Susan.
Hello, everyone.
We have Florine. And we have Teresa.
Hello.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. All right, so Frank, I'm going to start with you and just ask you why and when did you get started doing the research?
Okay, I started with genealogy around 1997. We got a notice in the mail. Do you want a book of addresses with people with the last name Chinappi from around the world? We said yes, we got the book, and I started writing a form letter to all of them to see if I could start getting information, and that's where my interest in genealogy started. Put together a nice binder with photos and various information that I collected. Didn't touch it for about 20 years. When I became a husband and father, I renewed my interest. So at this point, there were DNA tests available. We did a DNA test for the three of us, myself, my wife, my son, and I once again started looking up my family tree. My wife was adopted, so I set out to find her birth family, and that was a big learning process for me. And sometime later, my cousins, the Grisnellis, wanted to learn a little bit about their father who was adopted into our family, see if we could find out who his birth family were. So after, and I believe it was Susan who did the first DNA tests with Ancestry and 23andMe, I asked for the opportunity if I could see if I could track down Uncle Peter's birth family. And I've been working on this now steadily for about 2 years, and this is where we are right now.
Okay, so how many years did you start? How long ago was it when you started?
For searching for Uncle Peter's family, it's now been about 2 years. Searching for my own family, it's been on and off for about 20 years, but it's mostly in the last 5 years that I've taken a very, very serious interest in this.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I've been doing it for about, I don't know, 15 now or something like that. So it does become ingrained in your DNA or a bug that you have that doesn't let go once you start finding stuff.
I think the word obsession may be somewhat fitting.
I think you're right. Yep, that's what my wife says. Did you find any dead people today?
Yeah. Trying to contact people you find on social media. Hey, I think we're related. Will you tell me about everybody who's dead? It's not what I anticipated that I would be doing later in my life, but it's definitely been a wonderful experience meeting people that I happen to be related to and then trying to track back how exactly we're related.
Yeah, no, it is a lot of fun. So I want to ask the ladies how they got started and how they got involved in all of this.
Well, this is Susan. I guess I'll start. I did the DNA test just what percentage of Italian I was. I started on one site. My husband's family member had mentioned how much thorough that was. I mainly just to find out and my own heritage. But then it got me thinking about my dad, a lot about my mom, but not so much about my father's ancestors, parents for that matter. Curiosity just got. I remember my dad years ago saying that he would like to find his birth. That was well before thing. Mom and dad hit a wall, kind of stopped. I just thought it would pick up, try to find a little bit out about if he does have any living relatives, any similarity. That's how I got started. All what are digging a little technology. Frank has been very interesting. Are would be awesome.
Right. So, with that, have you, through Ancestry, has anybody actually, found relatives that you don't know yet? And I'll just give you my little take on it. My children are both adopted, and my son, he wasn't really interested in finding his birth parents, but my daughter was, and she kept asking us when she was starting, I guess she was about 14, and she was adopted in Florida, and we told her, you have to wait until you're 18. And in Florida, they have a registry. So if the birth parents and the child both sign up for the registry, they make the connection. Well, in her case, her birth parents didn't do that. So they didn't show up, of course. So we got a private investigator, and it really didn't take that long. I mean, I probably could have done it myself, I guess. But he was able to find them. And as a result, I've been able to trace her family back actually pretty far. And two of her more notable, or three of her more notable ancestors are Daniel Boone, Captain Morgan, and she's also a distant cousin of Princess Diana. So that all came out interesting. So, what, if anything, have you found so far?
We'll be right back.
Experience Italy like never before, traveling with a scheduled group or create your own bespoke tour with friends with PhilItaly.com. Pack your bags and follow Phil. That's www.philitaly.co.
Okay, I'll answer this one. Um, Here's what I found. I went through all of Susan's DNA matches, and I found the majority of them and how they're connected into our tree. In terms of famous people that Uncle Peter would be related to, well, it turned out that Uncle Peter was a distant cousin to the family that adopted him, and we did not know that. Our understanding, and I think the Rizzanellis will be able to answer this better. Uh, there were stories about whose Peter's birth family might be, and what I discovered is that, well, Peter comes from the same village as the family that adopted him, and he was a distant cousin of the family that adopted him. One of the challenges is that Peter married someone who was also a distant cousin of his, which made going through the matches somewhat challenging because they're all the same cousins, just different degrees. Um, but eventually, using hints through 23andMe and a process of elimination, we've actually found the family names of Peter's birth parents. and who they're directly descended from. So we're very close. And people that Peter is related to, uh, Bened- Benedito Nardone, the former president of Uruguay, is a distant cousin of Peter's. Um, and basically anybody from the village of Gaeta, which may include a pope, and Alex Rocco, who played Mo Green in the Godfather movies, are also very distant cousins as well.
Yeah, that's great when you find somebody that you didn't know. I was telling Franco before we got on that I found uh, third and fourth cousins in Italy that I never knew existed, and I I don't know if you know, but I mentioned it to him. My dad's mom comes from two noble families, and mentioning the popes, I'm actually a direct descendant from at least two popes. The most famous of the two popes is Paul III, and we were having a lot of fun one day when we were watching the Borgias because the Borgia popes, Pope Alexander, his I don't know if you called a main squeeze back then, but anyway, his girlfriend was my great grandfather's sister. And in the show, they actually show that the sister kept torturing the Pope to say, "You have to do something here with my brother. He needs something to do." So he just happened to make him a cardinal, even though he wasn't a priest yet and was still in seminary school. So that's a little fun story of mine.
I love it. I love it. I love finding how we're related to people. In fact, one of the stories about Peter was that he discovered he was a distant cousin of his best friend. And I think I'm going to ask the Grisanelli sisters to speak on that about Peter and his longtime friendship.
This is apparently his best friend that always Nick Murphy. He's always been a very good friend of my father's. They hung out together all the time. Frank, I think it was you discovered they were cousins. I don't believe the two men ever knew that they were related. I don't think neither man was aware that they were actually related. Relative. Pretty interesting. But I do remember when I'd see Vic how he had some similarities to dad, but you don't put it together like that. I just thought it was just Italian trait that Italian men had. I could see some resemblance.
Yeah, well, Italian men all have one trait in common. We're all very, very good looking.
Very true. Very true.
I must agree. I must strongly agree.
So I'll give you a couple of stories that are similar. I had one of my close friends did Ancestry, and he came back and he said, "Are you MR on Ancestry?" And I said, "No." I said, "That's my wife. She's MR, and I manage hers." And he turned out to be a fifth cousin of my wife. My wife's mom is from Sicily, and his dad and his mom are from Sicily. So we haven't put together the exact connection yet, but uh, there is something there. Another interesting story was I got a message on Ancestry from somebody who I'd never heard of before, and she said, "I think we're researching the same person, Maria Piramalo." And I said, "Yeah, we are." I said, "That's my grandmother's aunt who came to the U.S. in 1905, and my grandmother came in 1915. And they are the only two Piramalos that I've ever found in the United States that stayed here." And so I could never figure out why my grandmother came until I found this aunt. And as it turns out, that in the 20s and 30s and 40s and even into the 50s that the families were so closely intertwined, but we didn't know about it. And I actually lived for 5 years or so when I first got married to my first wife, about 5 blocks from her grandmother and her aunt that lived in the same house. We probably passed each other on the street. And my dad always referred to her grandmother as Aunt Beatrice. And the really, really crazy part of the story is that her uh, aunt worked for my grandfather, who had an embroidery business in New York City in the 20s and 30s up until the 50s with his brother. And when we finally met last year, she brought me over beads from my grandfather's shop that her grandmother had saved.
Wow. Love it.
It is quite amazing. And same thing with my wife. She has a grandmother that has the same last name as one of my cousin's great great grandmothers. And I've been trying to make that connection. And they both come from the same fishing village in Sicily. They both lived in Little Italy in New York City at the same time. They have other common relatives, but I haven't been able to make that connection yet, even though several people have done the ancestry. So, the link may just go back too far for me to be able to find it. But I keep thinking to myself, somehow they have to be related. She has to be related to my cousin.
Really start digging how many connections you have without realizing. I know, like we said before, Frank has been very instrumental finding a lot of these. Sometimes becomes overwhelming, baffling at how close you can be in proximity to someone and not really know that they're related. And I think that's another reason why I would like to know who my father's relatives are, because I could be missing out on a cousin that I didn't know I had. With Italians, I'm sure you realize a lot of it is about family. Kind of sad that we never really, well, I should not to. Hopefully, we do have a chance to find out if there is anybody in America or even Italy, wherever in the country, wherever in the world, that might be able to contact and just get a little information from. I mean, to have my father's adoptive family, which we love, they are always going to be our aunts and uncles and cousins. That'll never ever change or what we find out. But don't even have any medical history. How do we know what my father's side is prone to? That's another reason I think I would like to know. Or prone to strokes, heart attacks, cancer, those kind of things too. You don't have that when you have an adoptive family member, unless you have the history of the adopted person.
Yeah, that's true, and that's one of the things that we were lucky enough to find out with my daughter. One of the most amazing things for me was that I actually was able to find cousins in Italy, and we've been conversing back and forth, and they sent pictures and I sent pictures, and some of the photos are just unbelievable. Where one of the cousins looks just like my second cousin. I mean, I have a picture of the two of them when they were probably in their 20s, early 20s, and they look exactly alike. They look almost like sisters. And the same thing with my grandmother and one of her cousins that would have been approximately the same age. The resemblances are really phenomenal. So it's really exciting when you find something like that.
Sure, it is. Yeah, it's.
We'll be right back.
Lafayette, we are here. The French history podcast for the American public by a Frenchman. Learn all about France's fascinating history, its great characters like Charlemagne, Joan of Arc, Louis XIV, or Napoleon, but also the great events that marked France, Europe, and sometimes the whole world. Lafayette, we're here. Available wherever you get your podcast or on lafayettepodcast.com. À bientôt.
I think something we're all looking forward to. Well, some of the pictures that Frank has put up can see some similarity. I don't know, maybe I'm a little skeptical.
So, Frank, I want to come back to you and ask you, to the point about roadblocks and what roadblocks do you have, or where are you as in Italy, and how far back have you gotten in Italy?
In the general family tree, I've probably gone back to the mid 1700s on my direct lines. Uh, for Uncle Peter, I've probably gone back to the mid 1800s. Uh, and just through a process of elimination and just matching everything from third to fifth cousins, I now believe I have the names that his parents were likely to have. One of them is Rosato, and for the other parent, it's either a Caruso or a Camillo. I don't know which one is the father and which one is the mother. Not yet. But I do know who some of the great grandparents are, and that has helped me narrow this down. So, to anyone listening, if you have roots from the village of Gaeta in Italy, and you come from a family of Rosato, Caruso, Camillo, chances are you're related to us and we would like to know you. There was a story that we uncovered in the research of Uncle Peter that when he was about 15 years old, Peter was approached by a woman who said, "I'm your birth mother, and I want you to come and meet your brothers." At the time, Peter was 15. He did not even know he was adopted. So he dismissed this woman, saying, "I don't know who you are. I already have a mother. I already have brothers. Please go away." It's only a couple of years later that Peter found out that he was adopted. Now, this story only came up during the research of the last year. One of Peter's brothers shared it with me, his adoptive brothers. And the rest of the family hadn't heard this, so it was almost dismissed as, well, did this really happen? Did he misunderstand? When I contacted Peter's best friend to say, "Hi, Peter's best friend, it turns out you and Peter were distant cousins as well," he confirmed that Peter had told him that when he was a teenager, that a woman claiming to be his birth mother had approached him. So what do we know for sure? If this story is true, that means Peter has at least some half siblings out there. I'm under the assumption right now that his birth parents did not get married after he was given up for adoption, which means he may have half siblings from his birth mother and half siblings from his birth father still alive. So if he does have brothers from his birth mother, and I'm reaching out now to whoever's listening. If your mother was a Rosato, a Caruso, or a Camillo, and you heard a rumor or a story that you had a half brother that was somehow given up for adoption, please reach out to us, because you might be Peter's half sibling, and we want to know you.
Yeah, well, that's interesting, and I think you're on the Facebook blog page, the Italian genealogy blog. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you put it out there too if you haven't already. Interesting thing about Caruso, Have you any thoughts that you somehow might be related to Enrico? And the reason I ask is my cousin that I was talking about earlier, Linda. Her, I think it was her great grandfather, I believe, was Enrico Caruso's road manager, and she has photos and she has a handwritten note from Enrico Caruso from to her. Like I said, I think it's a great grandfather.
Well, here's what I can tell you. If Enrico Caruso's roots go back to Gaeta due to something called endogamy, he will surely be related to us. If his roots do not go back to Gaeta, it's always possible that somebody traveled and there's no documentation of it. But from what I understand, the Caruso name is a fairly popular one, and you can find it in a lot of different villages across Italy. There would have to be a connection to the province of Latina. So if we could figure out if Enrico Caruso is in fact from Gaeta, then no question, he would be related.
Yeah, and I know that is a fairly a common name. Franco, you have a question, yeah?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring something up that we haven't covered yet. Peter was born in the late 1920s, which means that his siblings right now, if he does have half siblings, would probably be in their late 80s, early 90s. So they may still be alive. And if they do live in Gaeta, we're looking for someone who's either a Rosato, Caruso, Camillo, or a descendant of a Rosato, Caruso, Camillo in their 80s or early 90s, maybe even their 70s. They could be Peter's half siblings.
And you know, Franco, how I did it with some of my Piramalo cousins. Again, Piramalo is not a very common name, so it was probably a little bit easier. But I knew certain towns where they came from, and I just went on Facebook and I put in the town and I put in the name and I just started. If I found a Piramalo someplace, I would ask them, "Hey, do you recognize these names?" So it's something to try. You'd be surprised. You go out there on Facebook in Gaeta and say, "Did you ever hear of this name or that name?" And somebody may just come back to you. You
To
never
be
know.
to be honest, I've actually done that.
You did. Any luck?
Yes and no. I actually found a Caruso family that fits all of the criteria that I'm looking for. Uh, I don't want to say too much about them because once they understood that I was researching this, trying to find a connection to Peter, they're not interested in doing any DNA tests. And they asked, at least this one particular family, asked to be left alone. And so when I said, well, will you put me in contact with some of your uncles or aunts or cousins because they might want to help me out and work together and find the connection? And I was told no. So I may have in my family tree right now, I may have a name that could be a parent of Peter, but until I get that DNA test done, or until someone can confirm, yes, they know the story, uh, there's there's no way to know for sure, and I don't want to commit myself to a story that may or may not be accurate. Uh, I'm hoping that some people that I know in Gaeta will share this podcast as well as an article I wrote on my family tree blog called Help Us Solve a 90-Year Mystery, all about my research trying to find Peter's birth family. Has all the birth names, has all the family names of the deceased that I know Peter is connected to. You'll find it at chinapifamilytree.com. Set up the website specifically for this mission to try to find Peter's family. And sometimes the information is great and people are willing to talk to you. Not always willing to go to the next step, but I have to respect their privacy, which is why I can't say more about what I discovered. Um, but somewhere out there, whether it's in different places in the United States, where something about the people of Gaeta, when they came over to the US, they tended to stick together. So if you're from Gaeta and you traveled with a lot of your friends and your family's friends from Gaeta to the US and you're all still living in the same neighborhoods, chances are that if your roots go back to Gaeta at least 3 or 4 generations, you're probably all related, however distantly. And I'm hoping that somebody in the US and somebody in Gaeta is going to reach out and say, "This sounds familiar. Let me take it to a friend of mine whose last names match up." So that's what I'm focusing on now.
Yeah, and that's a shame that they didn't get back to you. I mean, I've been pretty lucky with some of the cousins over there, but I understand, and it's the same thing for some reason. And I don't, it could be cost, or it could be they could very easily trace back their roots, so they don't feel the need to do a DNA or find out how Italian they might be. I've been trying desperately to at least get one or two over there to do a DNA test. And they say, "Yeah, well, okay, I'll think about it," and then nothing happens. But I would love to get some DNA from Italy, and I've bounced on one or two other ones, that really really distant. But nobody that I know for sure is related to me has done it yet. So I wish they would.
I sometimes envision going to Gaeta, and once I'm there, ordering a number of 23andMe kits. And then as I'm traveling, and I say, "Hey, look, we might be cousins. Will you spit in this for me?" And I'm sure it'll be a memorable trip and hopefully an efficient one.
I hadn't thought of that, but I think there's one cousin over there in particular who's been really really super. Unfortunately, I only speak English. She only speaks Italian, but she's been fantastic. And I might just do that. I might just bring a kit with me and have her do it for me and see where it goes.
What I've done is that in my research for my own tree, um, I actually just made the investment and I bought a series of kits for different relatives that I wanted tested. Okay, my father passed away the same year as Uncle Peter, so I wasn't able to get him DNA tested. But I DNA tested my mom, I DNA tested my father's brothers, and I DNA tested one of my aunts, all of whom have roots in Gaeta. And lo and behold, they're all distant cousins of one another.
Right. Well, that's not a surprise. Yeah, because those towns were very very small and
Well,
very concentrated.
you're dealing with a town whose population is about 15,000,
Right.
and it's not like even if we only go back to the mid 1800s, it's not like they had automobiles and airplanes and traveling from village to village is easy. We take that for granted now when all you have to do is get into your car or get into the subway system and you could be across town in an hour. Not It was a lot more difficult back then. So people would marry their close relatives just because, hey, let's keep the land together. And how far do you really want to go to find a spouse?
Right. Right. So before we finish, I'll just throw it open to anybody. Does anybody want to ask me a question about what I found, or maybe help with a roadblock or something like that?
I'll take this one. Let me start off by saying, how do you not get discouraged when you have a brick wall that, try as you might, you've reached out to all the DNA matches you have. A lot of them are not writing back. People are refusing to give you any straight answer or concrete answers to who their grandparents were. Um, how do you just not lose faith that you're eventually going to break through that brick wall and get that answer?
That's an interesting question because there's kind of two parts to that. The first one is sometimes I just would walk away for a few weeks and just clear my head, not do any ancestry. Uh, because after a while everything starts to get fuzzy and you just can't think clearly. That being said, there were two occasions where I felt I had to reach out to a professional in Italy, and it wasn't that much. And now I have several that I could turn to now, to get some help. But in one case, for my grandmother's father's family, uh, I knew where I was, and I was 99.9% sure I was looking at the right family. The problem that I had was my third great grandmother. Uh, she merged the family names. She inherited the title from her husband, or actually two titles. And what happened was when her brother passed away, she got the title from him, which is very unusual in Italy. And I don't know why or how, but in any event, she got the title. She merged the two family names. Her family was Capici Piccicelli, uh, and they. Her brother was the Duke from Capricotta. Her husband was a count from Montebello in Calabria. She merged the names and the titles to Pieromalo Capici Piccicelli. That being said, the only son who got those three names were her oldest son, who inherited the titles. The rest of her children kept just the Pieromalo name, which made sense because that was their father's name, and they didn't get any titles. They were still doing okay. So I knew deep down inside, I knew what I was looking at, but I don't take anything for granted. So I asked a professional, "Can you help me with that?" Which he did, and he also found me a bunch of records that I couldn't find. So that helped. The Sorrentino family, my dad's family, was a complete brick wall. His father, I could not find his records in Italy. I could not find his father's father. Total brick wall there. And I knew that my great grandfather's name had to be Achille because my oldest uncle's name was Achille. So it had to be. I asked, my father had already passed. My mom had already passed. Not that she would have known anyway. I asked uh, some of my father's brothers, my grandfather's brother's family. They were giving me names that didn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked him for some help. And finally, he found me the records for my great grandfather, my great great grandfather, which also had my third great grandfather's name. So, sometimes you just have to reach out and try and find somebody to help you. Once I got those, it opened up a lot of doors that I probably wouldn't have found if I didn't do that. So I was able to find records on my own after that. And so, that's two things. Sometimes you just have to walk away and clear your head, and other times you just got to ask. You got to get that little bit of professional help, and it's really not that expensive. It really wasn't.
Good to know. We may be looking into that and trying to find someone who's a Italian genealogist based in Gaeta, because all roads lead to Gaeta. So it'll be. I'm hoping won't be as challenging since everything's concentrated in one little village.
Yeah, and I have several people that I could send you the links to, and you could look at their websites and see what region is Gaeta in.
It's in the Lazio area, province of Latina.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I know at least one person that's over there. So, and a lot of them, they research all of Italy, but I could send you some suggestions, and you could look at their websites and
That would be
send them
great.
an email. They're all really super nice people, and some of them even give you an hour's worth of research for free, to see where it's going.
All right.
Well, I really appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun. I love talking about this stuff. So Thanks, Franco, and thanks, Lisa, and Terry, and Suzanne.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Bob.
Bob.
I love that. That was in chorus. Thanks for listening. Follow us on Facebook in the Italian Genealogy group or at www.italiangenealogy.blog.